Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And we're coming at you. We're just cranking out the main course. We're coming at you with some more main course here. We're gonna. I feel as if I gotta go in on a Saints player a little bit here. Talk about the injury report, and then give you my player of the game hot take and game pick for this game. But first thing I want to get into before I ask for the menu here, I just want to shout out a new subscriber, Rudy Roo. I appreciate your subscription. I appreciate your interest in the channel. So I just want to shout you out. I really want to thank you for subscribing. And that goes for anyone else out there that wants to subscribe, like, share, comment, anything like that. I want to hear from you. I want to know there's people out there that are into this podcast that'll just keep me going. So I really appreciate that. And right now I'm sitting at 69 subscribers. So who can push me over into 70? Who's going to get me there first? So I just want to thank you again, Rudy Roo, and I hope you become a fan and a long time keeping up with me and continue to like my content. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And if I can identify you, I'll give anyone else a shout out there because it's really appreciated. So thanks. And so let's get into this. I want to get into also how I felt about the Detroit Lions Green Bay Packers game on Thursday as well. So can I get a menu? And I was watching the Green Bay Packers Detroit Lion game yesterday, and that's a I guess that's a prime time game. Thursday night games are prime time games, and once again the Green Bay Packers are playing in Lambeau, so they're playing at home 2 games in a row, and it looks like they're going to get down, by 17 points, 20 points again against the Detroit Lions in the first half. So it was just an interesting scenario of if they're going to pull off a comeback win again, which obviously that didn't happen, but my feeling going into that game is that I wanted the Green Bay Packers to lose. That kind of would have cheered me. At first, I felt that would cheer me up a little bit, but then as the game went along, and I think it was what 20-3 going into halftime. So the Detroit Lions had a 17-point lead going into halftime, just like the Saints. But then the Green Bay Packers just continued not to do anything. They didn't turn it on in the second half or in the fourth quarter like they did against the Saints. The Detroit Lions just continued to put it on them, and through a good portion of the game, like maybe into the third quarter, the Green Bay Packers only had like 1 yard of offense or negative yards of offense, and the Detroit Lions were doing a lot better job of putting pressure on Jordan Love than the Saints did. They got some sacks on him, some hits on him, and really were disrupting him a lot more than the Saints did, especially more than you would have expected what the Saints did in the game in week 3. Because in the first 2 weeks, the Saints D line looked dominant with getting pressure on quarterbacks. Like in each game, they had 3 or 4 sacks. So it was just a surprise to see another team, especially on Thursday night, because it seems like the teams that are playing at home on Thursday night usually have the bigger advantage, but that definitely didn't seem that way last night with the Detroit Lions pretty much just blowing the Green Bay Packers out. I think the final score was like 38-20. So the Green Bay just looked bad, honestly. They just looked like a bad team. And like I was saying, I kind of wanted to see Green Bay lose. I thought that would make me feel a little bit better, but just with the way Detroit Lions handled them and made Jordan Love look like an inept young quarterback, it made me feel like how did the Saints lose to them? Like like if the Detroit Lions, who I know are probably I'm gonna say they're a better team than the Saints, just solely off of having a better offensive line, and the Green Bay Packers are probably uh, similar, have their ups and downs, but probably have a better offensive line as well. but maybe not, because Detroit Lions were getting after. But after a while, I just it started making me sick to think like the Saints weren't able to close this game out on the Green Bay Packers and should be 3-0 right now. They should be the fourth 3-0 team in the league right now, even with Derek Carr going out. Like I was using early in the week. I was really using the Derek Carr injury and him going out of the game as an excuse for the Saints not winning that game and not being 3-0. But after watching that game, I don't think the Saints should have been able to at least hold on and win that game. But I guess you can say that the Green Bay Packers did score 17 points in the second half, and they already had 3 points in the first half. So maybe that still would have been enough to beat the Saints, who were only able to score 17. But yeah, I ended up started feeling good about Green Bay Packers losing that game, and then started kind of trailing off and was feeling sick again about that loss and blowing that lead in week 3. But anyways, that's enough of that. Let's get into the injury report a little bit. I have to go in on one of these players, and good, he's at the top of the injury report because there's a lot of different generations out there and older generations that say uh, kids and the newer generations are like soft and aren't as tough and definitely when it comes to the NFL and sports, players seem to do load management definitely in the NBA and aren't aren't more willing to play through injuries. Maybe it's because there's more science and knowledge about how that kind of stuff can lead to more problems after your playing days. But I got to go in on this one here. So let's get into this injury report a little bit. And if one of these players doesn't play, which he's not going to play, and the other one does end up playing, that tells you a lot about a player, their mentality, I think. So the first player on the Saints injury report is safety Jordan Howden, and his injury is a finger, okay, and he played last week. He played against the Packers with the finger. It actually looked pretty good. I think there was only maybe like one play where he kind of gave up a pass and had to get in there and make a tackle. But other than that, for your free safety or your strong safety, really never hearing their name called is sometimes a good thing. That means that they're holding down their coverage and they're not having to get beat or allowing catches or anything. But so he must have injured the finger more in that game, even though I don't ever remember him coming out holding his hand or anything like that. But he didn't practice on Wednesday, he didn't practice on Thursday, and he didn't practice on Friday. So he's out for this game with a finger. And I've heard some reports, seen some rumors that maybe he had surgery on it. But every time I hear of any player that's maybe not an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman who has to use their hands and, you know, uh, is on every play, their hand is getting hit, their wrist is getting bent back. I just don't see how a player, a safety, definitely a safety because they're not even like a cornerback who's like going to jam receivers at the line on a good portion of the plays, but a safety out with a finger. And what I was going to say about going back, anytime I see this with like a DB or a linebacker before it's decided whether they're not going to play or they're going to be limited in practice. I always want to go back to Marshawn Lattimore in 2021 when he had a wrist injury or a hand injury going into week 1 in Jacksonville against Green Bay, and he played. He played. I don't think he didn't miss a game that season due to that injury. And he had a club on his hand. His hand and wrist was all wrapped up, and he even had an interception off of Aaron Rodgers. So I just don't understand. Jordan Howden, a rookie, can't play through a finger injury. I guess I understand a little bit if it's some kind of ligament damage that's going to need some time due to having surgery. But if he could have just played through it through the season and got the surgery afterwards, it's kind of odd. I mean, I can't say from really experience, like higher levels of football or anything, but I've had my finger jammed back like really bad, just playing catch in the yard or in high school playing tag football or flag football. I've had it like trying to catch a pass and the tip of the football just hitting like one finger, or even like I said, playing like tag football. I've hit my thumb before and jammed it like trying to tag someone and hit another player like right in the sternum with it and jamming it. And I understand those finger injuries can be tricky because when injuring those fingers like I did there, they hurt for like a year. They were tender for a year or more after doing that. So I understand you can definitely hurt your finger like really bad, but I wasn't debilitated from it, but they swell up and they hurt for a good period of time. Like I never went to the doctor or anything, but it's possible that I had a small tear or ligament damage in those fingers. But I don't play college football. I don't play professional football, so maybe I guess I don't know what he's dealing with. But another player to go back, a recent player who I can't remember if if I'm trying to think if it was a toe injury or a foot injury by a toe injury or a finger injury from Marcus Davenport. Now that I'm thinking about it, it may have been one of his toes. I can't remember if it was his finger or his toe. Either way, like I don't. If it was his toe, then he missed some games due to it. But if it was his finger, I don't remember him missing any games due to his finger injury. Obviously, he missed games due to almost any other injury you can think about. But in the off season last year, he had it just like he just got it cut off, and then he was good to go for the season, even though he had his worst season as a Saint. He may have played almost in the most games he's ever played in, but still didn't only had like a half a sack or no sacks, and what was terrible. Good enough to get a $10 million contract from the Vikings and then be a healthy game day scratch. But another player I think about when thinking about this finger injury, hand injury, wrist injury is I guess it was 2006 or 2007. Fred Thomas, he played with a club on his hand. And unlike Marshawn Lattimore getting an interception, I remember him outright dropping a couple interceptions, probably due probably due to having the club on his hand, but he still played. But, you know, almost 20 years ago, I understand that's a completely different time in the NFL, a completely different generation of players. I think it's safe to say enough that those players were tougher or maybe not quite as smart when dealing with their injuries. Not as educated. Not that they're not smart, but not as educated. So I just had to go in on Jordan Howding a little bit there. So the next player is Derek Carr. So he's dealing with the right shoulder injury, his throwing shoulder, the AC joint. So just a shoulder sprain, which you think for definitely a quarterback, that's about the worst injury you could have. And he didn't practice, and I was surprised to see this. So he didn't practice on Wednesday. He didn't practice on Thursday, but he actually practiced. He's already practicing. He practiced on Friday, and they're saying from like the practice reports that he took first team snaps, red zone snaps, did the red zone drills, and looked good. They're saying that they said he didn't favor anything. You couldn't notice an injury or him kind of after making a throw, pulling back on the throw like he's hurt or anything like that. And they said he was like perfect, like on every throw that he made. So now he's listed as questionable. So that he actually has, I don't know, a fair chance of playing after what looked like initially a season-ending injury against Green Bay when Rashawn Gary had to backpack man him and slam him to the ground. That's just wild to me if he ends up playing. So, and I understand from being kind of a part-time Raiders fan because my buddy's a Raiders fan. I've seen Derek Carr come back from injuries that you would think would end his season, obviously not the one in 16 where he got his leg broke against the Colts in I'm trying to think, I think that was in week 16, but that's a little bit different than a shoulder injury. But I seen the game where uh, when Marcus Mariota had to come in for him, and you're seeing him scramble. He scrambled out of the pocket to the right, I believe, and he's running, and he's about to run out of bounds. And as he's running out of bounds, you literally see like his uh, groin muscle like contract and looks like it like literally like ripped off the bone. And then uh, Marcus Mariota comes in and puts up pretty good stats and looks good. And you're thinking almost like Derek Carr's about to lose his job to Marcus Mariota. I don't think they won that game, but I think just in the next week he's coming back in from what looked like a serious groin injury. So Derek Carr, he's got some Wolverine healing powers, and he's a tough guy, even though he's a little bit older. Uh, I don't know. I would give him, I think that's what questionable is listed about, listed in the first place, is designated as being like 50-50, which a lot of times with the Saints, listed as questionable, it just means you're not going to play. But I may be giving him a chance. And then, so moving on from that, uh, and the third player on the list is Cesar Ruiz, still in concussion protocol. So he didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday, didn't practice Friday, and then his game status he's out. So that's not really much of a surprise. And then besides Derek Carr, probably the worst injury uh, player on this list is cornerback Paulson Adebo. You're starting outside number two corner, who I think has looked good in the first two games. I don't really, he never really gave up a big play or anything. Not very many catches, having interceptions, only negative that I would put on him for like an asterisk for that is that he had some pass interference, holding plays that gave up, uh, nullified some big plays by the Saints. But other than that, and that's something that he's always kind of been known for. He's a physical corner, likes to get his hands on wide receivers. So that's just kind of something you got to deal with Paulson Adebo. But now, just like last year, at the beginning of last year, he's dealing with some injuries, and now he's dealing with some more injuries. So I don't know, maybe he's starting to kind of become a little injury prone now, which is that's not something you want with you to be happening with your starting corner. But Saints, they still got Marshawn Lattimore, still got Alontae Taylor, who looked great last year for the majority of the game until he gave up the big pass interference call. But Paulson Debo still out with this hamstring injuries, which can be tricky. They can keep players out all year, or they're easy to re-injure, but he hasn't gone on IR yet, short-term IR yet, like Jamal Williams did. But he didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday, didn't practice Friday, and he's out for the game. So that's not much of a surprise. And that injury is just really kind of annoying because he hurt that in practice. I'm pretty sure he practiced on Wednesday last week, and then maybe even practiced on Thursday, and then showed up as like limited on Friday due to the hamstring, and then didn't play. Was listed as questionable. And then I might give this player a little bit more than a 50-50 chance to play, even though he is listed as questionable as well. That's a tight end, Foster Moreau. He has an ankle, so he's been dealing with the ankle injury. And that was kind of a surprise when he popped up on that last week and didn't even play, because he had a couple catches in the game against Carolina and didn't look like he ever came out of the game due to an ankle injury. But he didn't practice Wednesday. He didn't practice Thursday, or he did practice Thursday limited and practice limited on Friday as well. And he's listed as questionable. Out of all these players on this list, I would give Foster Moreau the best chance of actually playing, which would be a boost. I think that would be a boost to have him back for his blocking ability to help in the run game and the pass game. Checking defenders coming around the edge. So hopefully, if nothing else, if just out of a miracle Derek Carr plays, hopefully Foster Moreau ends up being able to go. All right, on to the Bucs injury report, which is it's pretty long as well. The only thing I'll say about it is most of these players, I don't like almost every player on the Saints roster injury report is like a starter. So I think that's kind of the difference. That's the difference. That's the difference between Tampa Bay's injury report and the Saints. I think the the Tampa Bay Buccaneers only have like maybe like one player on this list that's like considered a starter. But Carlton Davis, so going with the first player here, cornerback Carlton Davis has been dealing with a toe injury, turf toe, which the Saints know all about that. That was the big time injury that they were dealing with last year. It seems like it's a hamstring injury now, but they dealt with that a lot with Trevor Penning hurting it in the last preseason game, and then Michael Thomas hurting his toe and having like dislocated toes. Um, and that all happened in week 3, and then that happened like come like week 9 or something. He found they did like another like check about it, evaluation of it, and found that he still had like a dislocated toe. I just don't even know how that happened. So the Saints know all about turf toe, and they can definitely keep you out. But Carlton Davis, I don't think he's played at all this year. Hasn't played in the Buccaneers' first 3 games, but he was limited on Wednesday, and then Thursday. This is kind of tricky here. He was full on Thursday, but then he was back to being limited on Friday. So maybe it must be bothering him still. It must have flared up a little bit on Friday after Thursday's practice. But he's limited. Yeah, he's listed his game time status is questionable. So uh, as Saints fans and people that have followed the Saints, a lot of times when an opposing player is listed as questionable, they end up going. But that 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 trend kind of came to an end last week with the Green Bay Packers when they had a bunch of players listed as questionable, and then all of them ended up like not playing. Like the only one that did play was Rashawn Gary, who ended up being a game wrecker for that in that game. So they listed as questionable, turf toe, him being limited and then being full and then being limited again. Wouldn't surprise me if he didn't play, but if that happens, I feel like he's going to try to go if he can go, because if that happens, they're going to be out. They're going to be missing both their starting corners for this game. Whether that matters or not, the Saints were definitely in the plus territory when it came to injuries in the Green Bay Green Bay game and weren't able to capitalize on it. But so he's listed as questionable. So I just don't how these injuries come up. I just don't know how to decipher them when players are listed as questionable. I liked it a lot more when you'd see like out, questionable, or probable, but you really rarely see probable anymore. So it's kind of it's either they're 100% out or it's like 50-50. So on to the next player on the Bucs injury report. It's a cornerback, Jamal Dean. So he's their other starting corner, and he has a neck and a shoulder injury, which that doesn't sound good at all. But he didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday, and didn't practice Friday, and he's out. And then linebacker Sir Vossier Dennis, who I don't believe he's a starter. So this is where I get into the part where the Buccaneers are missing quite a few players, but I don't think they're really starters. You know, it hurts their depth. So if their starter ends up going out, it could be a boost to the Saints, which we don't want to see people get injured. But regardless, he has a hamstring, and he's didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday, and didn't practice Friday, and he's out. And then D lineman uh, uh, Kalijah Campbell, who a lot of people thought the Saints were going to draft. You know, we're going to draft over Brian Breesy or maybe trade up and try to get. And some people thought he was maybe the best defensive tackle in the draft. Kalijah Campbell, Kalijah Cansey, and he didn't. I don't think he's played all year due to a calf strain, and he didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday, and didn't practice Friday, and he's out. So being a rookie, I guess wouldn't consider him really wouldn't have been the starter yet. Anyways, maybe he would have, but so he's dealing with injury and already missed 3 games. So you could say that the Saints made the right pick and are getting a lot more out of Brian Breesy than they would have got early on with Kalijah Campbell, Cansey. I don't know why I keep calling him Campbell, but he also may not got hurt when if he would have been with the Saints either. So it's really hard to know early on in both of these young players' careers. And then next player is cornerback Derek Pitts, who's dealing a hamstring. That's a big one this year, dealing with hamstring, and this hurts their depth. If they end up missing Carlton Davis too, this hurts their depth at cornerback with him being out. So he didn't practice Wednesday, he didn't practice Thursday, and he didn't practice Friday, and he's listed as out. And then nose tackle. Vita Vea been dealing with pectoral injury, with similar to like a hand injury. You're always using your hands and flexing those chest muscles when you're a defensive tackle on pretty much every play. So a pectoral injury is a bad injury for a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman. And he didn't. I think he's been dealing with this for a couple of games now. He didn't practice on Wednesday, didn't practice on Thursday, but kind of like Derek Carr, he was limited on Friday, and he's questionable. But he's a tough, hard-nosed, kind of a throwback player. Even though he didn't practice the majority of the week, it wouldn't blow me away if he ended up playing. And then linebacker Devin White, who these are their starters, but they're all like listed as questionable, like Carlton Davis, Vita Vea, Devin White. He's been dealing with a foot injury, so they've had some toe injuries and foot injuries and hamstring injuries, a lot like the Saints have over the last couple of years. He didn't practice on Wednesday, and then Thursday he was limited, and Friday he was limited. So I kind of expect Devin White. He's kind of a old school throwback, tough player, tougher than Jordan Howling, that's for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised if Devin White ends up playing. So, these injuries for the Saints and the Buccaneers, I think they're close to being equally weighted. But if the inactive list comes out before the game, like it did against Green Bay, and Carlton Davis, Vita Vea, and Devin White are all inactive, then it's kind of like the Green Bay game, that the Saints don't really have an excuse not to win that game unless Derek Carr is out, and then Jameis Winston goes out in the game as well. But so that's the injury report. Let's get to the hot takes and player of the game and game pick here. So the Saints, I think my player of the game, and people know about this. This is Mike Williams' daddy. Mike Williams is his son, and I think Marshawn Lattimore is going to be the player of the game. And I think that's the first time I picked a defensive player for my player of the game. And I think he's going to keep Mike Williams under 50 yards and with no touchdowns. And be ready for Mike Williams or Mike Evans to get frustrated and maybe try to start some stuff again with Marshawn Lattimore. That seems like every game that's what he ends up doing once he gets frustrated and isn't able to get anything going, not able to get any catches. And I think Marshawn Lattimore, I think that's what he's going to do. Hold Mike Evans under 50 yards and without a touchdown, and even get an interception off of Baker Mayfield. So that's my player of the game. And then my hot take, this kind of goes back into the injury report a little bit. I think Derek Carr, I don't know if I don't even know if I 100% believe this either. Maybe I'm just saying it to say it, but I think he's going to play. I think he's going to play. I don't know if it's the smartest thing in the world. I know he's got superhuman healing strength, and it may be, like I said, it may not be the smartest thing to play after having an injury like that. May end up getting injured again behind this offensive line, even though this probably didn't help much, but they were looking, had a lot of tryouts, had like 4 or 5 offensive linemen try out during practice this week, but they know it's an issue and are trying to fix it. But I think he's going to go. And man, if he does, uh, you got to respect him. He's a tough player. He's a throwback player. I think Drew Brees had this same injury, like maybe what in like 2016 or 2015 or something like that, and he only missed like 1 game due to it. So if Derek Carr comes back from it, uh, just a week after it happens would be wild. But no, that's why they're hot takes, because they're 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 a little off the chain. They're a little off the stove. So that's my hot take. And then my game pick for this game, I, I, I just don't really feel great about this game. Maybe I'll feel better if the Saints. Uh, I just have kind of a bad feeling about this game. I just feel really nervous, and it just there seems like a bad aura in the air, because I think the Saints on offense and defense kind of lose some swagger with Derek Carr being injured. But man, this is a tough one for me. I really do think it could go either way, but I'm picking the Bucs in this game. I know there's probably a lot of people out there that don't like that, don't want to hear that, but I think the Bucs are going to win this. I think they're going to win 19-14. So the good thing is the Saints will tie the record with the 1994, I think 1993, 1994 Cleveland Browns for having the longest streak of keeping teams under 20 points, which would be 12 games. So at least, even if the Saints lose, which I'd prefer them to rather lose, I'd rather them give up 100 points and score 101 points and win than I care really about this scoring streak, this defensive streak, which the Saints had a long streak like that. Uh, what was that? That was like last year, or maybe in 2021, when they were continuously keeping opponents, just individual running backs, under 100 yards. But I think that ended up getting like blown away in a game against the Eagles. Like that stat got thrown in the trash after a game against the Eagles towards the end of the season. I think that was in 2021, because the Saints running defense last year wasn't really that good at all. Like their interior, they gave up big runs right up the middle a lot of times, even to quarterbacks. The one I remember the most, and you see quite a few highlights of still, is the one against Joe Burrow, where he like takes off like they were down close to the Saints red zone, and he took off for like 21 yards. But so those are my hot takes. Player of the game and game pick. I hope the Saints can pull this. I want them to pull this off and win this game and be able to go to 3-1. Which, even with the loss to Green Bay, that would be still respectable, because majority of the league, unless they're 1-2 or 0-3, a good portion of the league that was undefeated in week 2 is 2-1, just like the Saints. So they win that game and go up 2 games in the division on the Panthers and Tampa Bay. I think that would uh, uh, put the Saints in first place in the NFC South. And then, of course, you're just hate watching the Panthers and the Falcons, hoping they lose so the Saints can get a full game lead in the division. But I'm ready for this game. After the game, the post game last week, I said I wasn't really feeling it. Wasn't super hyped up about this game, but it, I'm interested to see if Derek Carr ends up playing. So, and I think that even with him being injured, I think that would give the juice back, the energy back, and just nothing else. Hopefully, the offensive line is better. But, anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So, who dat? And can I get a check, please.